Continental Blacksmith found Loyalist minister's daughter bound to Liberty Tree with warning, no mercy for King's spies. Under the merciless October sun of Pennsylvania, Josiah Blackwood rode with a slow, steady rhythm, fallen leaves crackling beneath his mare's hoofs. He had been searching for iron ore deposits for half a day, the Continental Army's need for horseshoes and musket balls growing desperate as winter approached. The silence out here was sacred, broken only by the faint creak of leather, the whisper of wind through bare branches, and the occasional call of a distant crow. Josiah liked it this way. Alone, quiet, predictable. His forge back in camp could wait another hour. But then he heard it, so faint it might have been wind through dead leaves. A sound like a breath that had forgotten how to breathe. He froze in his saddle, head tilting, heart slowing. It came again, a whimper weak and sharp like a thread about to snap. He dismounted quickly, tying the reins to a dead oak limb. With his musket slung over his back, he moved through the scraggly maples and boulders until he came upon a clearing ringed by ancient trees. And there, beneath the largest oak, one the locals call their Liberty Tree, he saw her. She was hanging by the wrists, arms stretched above her, her body limp like a broken doll. Her feet barely touched the frost-hard ground. Her skin was pale as morning mist, her long auburn hair matted with sweat and blood. Her chest rose in shallow, erratic breaths, but she was alive. Josiah's eyes snapped to the crude wooden sign, nailed to the tree above her head. The words were scrawled in thick red paint, angry and jagged, death to King's horse. He stepped back involuntarily, while rising in his throat. The air thickened. A warning, a message, a curse. He glanced around, scanning the ridges, the rocks. No movement, no sound, just the wind brushing through dead leaves like whispers. His hand went to the knife on his belt. Christ, he muttered. What the hell did they do to you? The girl stirred barely. Her head lolled forward, and he saw the raw burn marks where the rope bit into her wrists. He swallowed hard. You hear me, girl? He asked, voice hoarse. No response. I'm not here to hurt you, he said softer, almost to himself, his boots crunching forward closer. He could see her face now, young, maybe 18, with a high brow and a strong jaw, her cheeks hollow from thirst. There was dried blood on her lip. He reached up, touched the rope. It was twisted hemp, harsh and old. Whoever tied it had meant for her to suffer, not just hang. He pulled out his knife. His fingers trembled. That sign, it screamed at him. He heard echoes of things he'd seen patriots do to Tory families, things that made his stomach turn even when they called it justice. But she groaned again, and that sound undid him. Hang all of them, he whispered, blades slipping into the rope. I ain't that. With one firm slice, the rope gave way. She fell forward, and he caught her just in time. Her body was warm, burning with fever, and light in his arms, like she had no bones left. Her eyes fluttered open, green, frightened, unfocused. Josiah eased her down to the ground, one knee in the frost. He poured water from his flask onto a cloth and dabbed her cracked lips. Easy now, he said. You're safe, at least for the moment. She blinked once, then again, still no words, but her hand clutched weakly at his sleeve. He looked at the sign one last time, then at her. You got a name? He asked gently. Nothing. Guess we'll find one for you, he murmured. He stood, lifting her with effort, cradling her like something precious and fragile. But for now, you're with me. And with that, Josiah Blackwood stepped back into the wilderness, carrying a girl marked for death and a secret that could hang them both. The sun was dipping low by the time Josiah reached his cabin, just a modest structure clinging to the edges of a forest too thick to forget violence. A single chimney smoked against the evening sky, and the old barn sagged like it mourned the horses long since taken by the army. The house itself was one room with a loft, roof patched with split shingles, but it stood solid and honest like the man who built it. Josiah eased the girl from the saddle and carried her inside. She was fevered, her head pressed to his chest, whispering breaths like dry leaves skittering across a stone floor. He laid her on his cot and unwrapped his coat from around her, careful not to startle her. Her eyes fluttered open for a moment, green and wide and distant, but they watched him. The hearth fire flickered against the log walls as he poured water into a pewter basin and set it near her feet. He grabbed a clean cloth from his chest and knelt. Her legs were bruised, scraped, one ankle swollen. Rope burns marred her wrists like brands. I ain't going to hurt you, he said, more to break the silence than to expect any reply. Just cleaning up a bit. He dipped the cloth into the warm water and wrung it out. Then slowly, reverently, he took her right foot and placed it in the basin. She flinched just barely. He paused, waited. When she did not pull away, he began to wash the dirt and blood from her skin, his movements gentle, precise, like he was touching something sacred. The water turned red and brown. He worked in silence, careful not to meet her gaze for too long, though he felt it on him, like a blade drawn halfway, unsure whether to strike or fall. Her lips parted once, as if to speak, but no sound came. "Reckon you don't talk much," he muttered, not unkindly. "That's all right. Silence is better than most things most days." He finished the first foot, then the other. She let him. When he was done, he wrapped them in soft linen strips and set her feet gently on a folded blanket. "You remind me of a stream I used to fish near," he said quietly, almost to himself. It was quiet most of the year. Looked peaceful, but after the spring thaw it ran deep and fast. Had a proper name, but the locals called it Mercy Creek. Don't know why, just Mercy. He looked at her again, studying her features in the firelight. Cheekbones sharp as ridge lines, lips cracked but full, lashes thick with unshed tears. She was young, too young for this kind of suffering. But there was something old behind her eyes, something that did not flinch from pain, only waited for it to pass. "I'll call you Mercy," he said softly. "Just for now. You look like Mercy might suit you." She blinked once slowly. No protest. No nod. Just breath. Josiah stood, hands wet, and reached for a blanket to cover her. He tucked it around her shoulders, then stepped back. "If you're hungry, there's porridge. Not much, but better than air." Still no answer. He grabbed his bedroll and dragged it toward the door. He would sleep by the forge tonight. Give her the space. It was not right for her to be watched by a stranger, especially not one with blood in his past and questions in his eyes. Before he stepped outside, he looked back one last time. She had shifted slightly, eyes closed, lips no longer trembling. The basin still sat beside the cot, tinged with the color of what had been done to her. He picked it up and emptied it outside, watching the water soak into the thirsty ground. Inside, she dreamed of fire, of horses, of ropes cutting skyward, and of hands, rough but gentle, washing the hurt away without asking anything in return. The days that followed passed with the slow rhythm of autumn life, but the silence inside the cabin was different now, thicker, charged with something just beyond reach. Mercy, as Josiah still called her, ate when he brought food, though never much. She moved with caution, eyes always alert, posture tight like an animal who had been caged too long. She never spoke, but he caught her watching him when she thought he would not notice. At night, Josiah left the cot and took to the barn, his musket beside him. He pretended it was to give her space. But the truth was more complicated. He was afraid, not of her, but of what her presence meant. That sign on the tree still burned in his mind. Death to King's horse. Whoever wrote it had meant for her to die slow, and whoever they were, they might still be coming. It was 3 mornings later when he first saw the boot print, smaller than his, newer than his, and angled toward the barn. Josiah squatted beside it in the hard-packed earth and studied the heel. Continental issue, infantry. The print was fresh, no more than a few hours old. He rose slowly, eyes scanning the tree line. Nothing but bare branches and morning mist. Back inside, Mercy sat by the window, still and silent. She did not look at him when he entered, but her body tensed. "You seen anyone?" he asked. She said nothing, only pulled the blanket tighter around her shoulders. "I think we've got company," Josiah murmured, more to himself. That evening he kept the fire low and stayed by the door, musket across his knees. The wind had died. Wolves howled far off, and the stars blinked into view like ghosts waking up. Mercy did not sleep. He could hear her moving inside, pacing the floor in slow circles. It was around midday the next day when the riders came. Dust curled behind 2 bay horses as they approached. The men atop them wore the blue and buff of Continental soldiers. Their muskets were shouldered, their faces grim with purpose. Josiah stepped down from the porch, one hand resting casually on his belt. The lead soldier reined his horse and squinted down. "You called Blackwood?" "Depends who's asking. Sergeant Mills, 2nd Pennsylvania Regiment. We're tracking a fugitive." The man pulled a folded notice from his cartridge box and handed it down. "You seen this one?" Josiah took the paper, already knowing what it would show. A crude sketch of a young woman with long hair and fine features, the words, "Wanted for treason and sedition. Mercy Whitmore, daughter of Reverend Thomas Whitmore. Reward, 20 Continental dollars." Josiah looked up slowly. "Can't say I have." "You sure?" the soldier asked, leaning forward. "Small, quiet, might be hurt, might be hiding. We think she was aided by someone passing near the Liberty Grove." Josiah held the paper a second longer, then folded it and handed it back. "Ain't seen nobody but deer and a cow that don't listen." Sergeant Mills narrowed his eyes. "She's not just a Tory sympathizer, Mr. Blackwood. Her father was caught sending intelligence to the British. She's part of a spy ring. That sign they left, patriots mean it." Josiah's jaw tightened. "If I see anything, I'll send word." The soldier studied him for a moment longer. Then he nodded once and turned his horse. "See that you do." Josiah watched him ride off until the dust disappeared. Inside, Mercy stood just beyond the curtain. She had heard every word. She stared at him, unmoving. He stepped in, took off his hat, and leaned it against the door. "They came looking, showed me a paper. Said you were wanted." She did not speak. "I told them no." Her eyes narrowed, confused, suspicious. "I don't know what you did, Mercy. And maybe someday you'll tell me. But out here a man makes choices. I made mine." He turned to the hearth, pretending to stir the porridge he had already made. Behind him, she moved, barely a shift, a small breath. And in that moment, trust cracked the silence just a little wider. The afternoon sun hung low, casting long shadows across the yard as the wind softened through the pines. It had been a strange day, too quiet, like the forest was holding its breath. Josiah sat on a porch, sharpening his knife with slow, rhythmic strokes. Each pass of steel on stone echoed faintly through the clearing. He focused on the motion more than the blade, as if the repetition might keep his thoughts from drifting too far toward the woman inside. Or not inside. He paused, cocking his head. The faint crunch of footsteps on fallen leaves reached his ears. Not a deer, not a horse, something lighter, human. He looked up. Mercy was outside. It was the first time she had stepped beyond the threshold on her own since he brought her home. Her bare feet touched the earth tentatively, like she was testing if it would still hold her. The woolen blanket he had left folded at the edge of her cot hung from her shoulders, trailing like a second skin. She walked slowly, her steps uneven but certain, toward the far end of the clearing where his forge stood cold and silent. Josiah set the knife aside, not moving at first. He watched her, not wanting to shatter the moment. She looked smaller in the light, more fragile, and yet something in the way she moved had changed. She was not escaping, she was reclaiming. She reached the bare patch of earth near the forge, a place where sparks and ash had long since burned away all growth. There she knelt carefully, as if kneeling before something sacred, and let the blanket fall to her elbows. Her fingers moved with purpose as she picked up a piece of charcoal and began to draw in the ash. Only then did Josiah rise. He walked over slowly, boots quiet on the leaves, giving her space. He stood a few feet behind her, watching her hand trace lines into the earth. In the ash, she had drawn a dove. Wings stretched wide in flight, but chains encircled it like iron fetters. The lines were bold and sharp, etched with tension. The dove looked alive and struggling, its wings angled upward, as though trying to break free from the bonds or rise with them. Josiah had seen war, seen symbols carved into musket stocks and burned into flesh. But this was something deeper. A cry of prayer. He squatted beside her, his voice low and respectful. "What's that?" Mercy did not look up. Her face remained still, eyes focused on the drawing. For a long moment she said nothing, as if deciding whether or not to let the memory free. Then she spoke. "Dove in chains," she said, voice dry and cracked like parchment left too long in the sun. "My father's parish seal. We carved it on pews, painted it on banners. Always flying, always bound." Josiah remained silent, his eyes never leaving the image. She tapped the center of the dove with the charcoal. "This was our family. We believed in peace and forgiveness, even for the king's men." Josiah could feel the tension in her body, the way her shoulders pulled back, the tightness in her jaw. She was bracing for something. "They came, Continental soldiers, local militia, last spring," she continued haltingly. Said we must swear loyalty, denounce the crown. Say we were traitors. She paused. The charcoal in her hand trembled. We said we pray for peace for all men. We would not choose sides. Her voice thinned. They burned the parish. Shot my father while he knelt in prayer. My mother died clutching her Bible. Josiah clenched his fists slowly, jaw tight. Something old and angry stirred in his chest. I ran, hid in the root cellar. They found me 3 days later. Beat me, tied me, called me spy. Said I carried messages to British officers. Then she turned, locking eyes with him for the first time. There was fury in her voice now. I never carried messages. I never spied. I only prayed. Her voice echoed in the open air like thunder across dry land. Josiah did not speak for a moment. Then his voice came, low but certain. I believe you. She turned back to the ash, dropped the charcoal. Her hands fell into her lap. Then her shoulders began to shake. At first she made no sound, just silent tremors. But then the sobs came, raw and unfiltered. She curled forward, arms wrapped around her knees, hair falling like a curtain. The pain was too big for her body, and it poured out in waves. Josiah stayed beside her, unmoving, unmoved. He did not reach for her, did not try to comfort with empty words. Instead, he reached out and pressed his hand into the ash beside the chained dove, palm down, fingers spread, his skin against the dust she had shaped with grief. It was not touch, it was testimony. She felt it. Eventually, her breathing slowed. She lifted her head, her face streaked with ash and tears. Their eyes met, unshielded. You can call me Mercy, she whispered. It was my true name all along. Josiah gave a small nod, voice like gravel and wind. All right, then. Mercy it is. They sat together in silence as the sun slid behind the trees, and the dove in the ash faded into shadow, but its truth, like the chains, remained. That night, the wind whistled low through the rafters, whispering through the chink and log walls like a ghost remembering its name. Josiah sat by the fire, boots off, sleeves rolled, tending a pot of venison stew. Mercy stood by the window, arms folded around herself, watching the night settle over the forest. The silence between them no longer felt like a wall. It was something gentler now, like shared breath. She turned suddenly. You want to know the truth? Josiah looked up, his spoon pausing mid-stir. He nodded once, careful not to press her with words. She walked slowly to the table, sat across from him. Her voice was quiet but clear. My father was a minister, she began. Our congregation was small, peaceful. We served all who came, Continental soldiers and British alike. We had rules, boundaries. We wanted only to heal. Josiah listened, his face unreadable but focused. Full winter ago, she continued, a Continental spy was found dead near our meeting house. Shot through the head. The local committee said it was British sympathizers. They blamed us. Her fingers tensed around the table's edge. But it was not. He died because he tried to force himself on one of our young women. Her brother defended her. Everyone knew, but they blamed us. Her eyes found Josiah's. The committee came, not just soldiers. Farmers, too. Townsmen with muskets and rage. They said they were taking justice. She swallowed hard, the pain rising in her throat. They burned our meeting house, shot my father while he read scripture. My mother died holding the prayer book the missionaries gave her. They left our deacon hanging from the Liberty Tree. She lowered her eyes. They found me in the church cellar. I was hiding with the communion silver, trying to save what I could. They said I was stealing, planning to sell it to the British. Said I was dangerous. They tied me, questioned me, beat me. Then they took me to that tree you found me on. Hung me up like bait. For who? Josiah asked, his voice a low scrape. For any Tories still alive and angry. For anyone still loyal to the crown. She stared at him, then asked softly, Why did you cut me down? He looked at her for a long moment, the fire crackling between them. Because once, he said, I was them. Her brow furrowed. My unit, Josiah said, voice flat. Last winter we raided a Tory farm. German family, they said maybe they were, maybe they weren't. I was following orders. We burned their house, took their livestock. His eyes grew distant. Their daughter was 16. I heard her crying in the barn after we fired it, but I was scared to disobey. I didn't help her. I waited for orders that never came. She died in the smoke before anyone moved to save her. The silence after that was different. Not empty, heavy. You saved me because you couldn't save her, Mercy whispered. He nodded. She studied him. If I had been truly guilty, would you still have cut me down? Josiah stood slowly, walked around the table until he was in front of her. She looked up, searching his face. He reached down, cupped her chin gently in one hand. His fingers were calloused from forge work, but his touch was careful, measured. I don't judge souls, he said. I only know what breathes in front of me. Her eyes welled, but no tears fell. She reached for his hand, pressed her cheek into his palm, and then, as if by instinct, they leaned into each other. The kiss was quiet, hesitant at first, then fuller, as if both had been holding their breath for too long and finally remembered how to exhale. Her hands trembled against his chest. His arms circled her back. The fire popped softly behind them. Later, they stood in the small kitchen, candlelight flickering against old wooden beams. Their shadows moved as one on the far wall, a slow dance neither of them had ever learned, but somehow knew. Outside, the forest wind calmed for the first time in days. Inside, something began to mend. The wind returned with the morning, gusting harder than usual, carrying the scent of snow and distant smoke. Josiah felt it in his bones, something shifting. He had lived long enough under the sky to recognize the wait before a storm, even if it came with boots instead of clouds. 3 days had passed since the kiss, since the words neither of them said aloud took root in the silence. Mercy had begun to move more freely around the cabin. She helped tend the fire, mended his torn shirt, even laughed once softly when Josiah cursed the stubborn door latch that refused to catch. But the peace was thin. By noon, a trail of smoke rose from the east. Josiah stood by the window, jaw tight, musket resting against the wall. For riders approached, local militia in hunting shirts and tricorn hats, muskets slung across their backs. Their leader wore a makeshift badge of tin that looked more self-appointed than earned. Blackwood, the man called as he dismounted. Heard tell you might be harboring someone who don't belong. Josiah kept his voice even. You hear a lot of things, Coleman. Don't make them true. Samuel Coleman spat into the leaves. A girl. Tori. There's a reward, 20 Continental dollars, and the thanks of every patriot this side of Philadelphia. You come all this way for a rumor? Coleman's eyes narrowed. We aim to search inside, just in case. Josiah stepped down from the porch slowly. You got authority from the committee? Coleman snorted. You think this is a courtroom, Blackwood? The other 3 men shifted in their saddles, hands near their weapons. The air hung brittle. I'm the only one lives here, Josiah said, voice calm. Ain't no girl, just ghosts and guilt. Coleman stared at him for a long moment, then gave a tight nod. If you're lying, you'll swing beside her. They rode off without checking the house, but the message was clear. They would be back with more men and less patience. That night, Josiah sat by the forge behind the cabin, the stars hidden behind heavy clouds. In his hand was the crude wooden sign he had pulled from the Liberty Tree and buried. Faded now, but still readable, still hateful, Death to King's Horse. He stared at it for a long time, fingers brushing over the letters. Then he stood and carried it to the forge fire. No ceremony, no speech. He laid it down among the coals and pumped the bellows once. The flames rose slowly, then swallowed the words in orange and gold. The wood cracked and curled inward as if the hate itself resisted dying. Behind him, footsteps. Mercy. She wore one of his old hunting shirts, too large on her frame. The sleeves rolled twice. She stepped beside him, eyes on the fire, not speaking. But her presence spoke enough. The flames danced in her eyes, reflecting something that looked like mourning and something like freedom. I should have burned it sooner, Josiah said quietly. She did not answer, but she moved closer, close enough for her shoulder to touch his. She gripped the shirt tighter around herself. Her fingers knotted in the fabric. Thank you, she said softly. The words were simple, but they landed like something sacred. He looked down at her, his heart heavy and alive all at once. The fire burned low, embers glowing. Above them, the wind slowed to a hush, and for the first time since he cut her down from that tree, there was no sign left of what had been written against her, only heat, smoke, and the weight of what they had chosen instead. The next morning brought no wind, just stillness thick and unnatural. Josiah rose early, packed hardtack jerky and a flask of water into his saddlebags. The air around the cabin felt tighter, more watched. He had seen more smoke on the horizon, too steady to be a hearth fire. Word had spread. They were out of time. Mercy stood by the fence line, hair braided back, wrapped in his spare coat. Her face was calm, but her eyes held questions. "We have to go," Josiah said, tying the final strap on his pack. "Tonight." She nodded, already knowing. "There's land south of here," he continued. "Past the Carolinas. Some say the Cherokees still live free in the mountains. Far from committees, far from signs." He paused. "We can make it if we ride hard." Mercy stepped closer, so close he could see the soft flush on her cheeks. She reached for his hand and held it firm. He looked down at her, voice barely above a whisper. "You'll come with me?" She pressed her forehead to his chest, her breath warm through his shirt. Then she answered, her voice slow and careful. "I want to live. I want to live as your wife." Josiah closed his eyes. That one sentence carried more weight than 1,000 promises. He kissed the top of her head, breathed in her hair like it was the last thing keeping him grounded. By sundown, they were ready. 2 horses saddled, the cabin left behind. No note, no fire, no goodbye. Just a quiet door left swinging and a home turned to memory. They rode through the forest under cover of stars, moonlight painting the ridges silver. Mercy leaned forward against her mare, her movements steady, practiced. She did not ask what lay ahead. She only followed. 10 miles from the Virginia border, the land opened into low rolling hills and stone outcroppings. Josiah scanned the horizon constantly, every shadow a threat. His gut turned tight. Then the shot came. A crack echoed across the valley. Josiah jerked in the saddle, then collapsed sideways, sliding hard into the fallen leaves. "Josiah!" Mercy screamed, leaping from her horse. He clutched his side, blood already soaking through his shirt. "Keep going," he rasped. "No." Another shot whizzed past them, striking a tree behind. From the ridgeline, 2 figures appeared, militiamen, muskets raised. Josiah groaned, pulling himself up. "We have to move." Mercy hooked her arm under his shoulder, trying to lift him. "Lean on me," he growled. "I won't leave you." Through sheer will, they stumbled toward the nearby rocks, musket balls cutting through the night. Josiah's boots dragged behind him, but he forced one step after another. Every breath came wet, his vision blurred. Somehow they reached a narrow gap between 2 hills, a hidden valley. Mercy half dragged, half carried him inside, pressed him to the stone wall, her own chest heaving. The shots faded behind them. The riders would not follow through the rocks. Not without losing speed, not without risk. In the shadow of the valley, Josiah collapsed to his knees, blood dripping onto the leaves. He looked up at her, pain and wonder both in his eyes. "You said you wanted to be my wife." She knelt beside him, cupped his face. "I meant it." His lips curved, even through the pain. "Then we'd better make it through this valley." She nodded. And for the first time since they met, Mercy prayed, not to the god of the patriots or the crown, but to the spirit of survival itself, because love in this place was always a gamble, and tonight they were betting everything. The cabin walls rustled gently in the mountain breeze, morning light slipping through the oiled paper windows like golden threads. Outside, songbirds called low, and a stream whispered over stone. Inside, Josiah lay propped on folded quilts, his breath slow but strong now. The fever had passed. The worst was over. Mercy sat beside him, a basin of cool water at her side, gently wiping down his brow. He watched her through half-lidded eyes, the corners of his mouth lifting slightly. "You always this bossy with your patience," he murmured. She raised an eyebrow, but smiled. "Only the ones too stubborn to die." He chuckled, then winced as the laughter tugged at the stitches in his side. She hushed him gently, placing a palm over his chest to steady him. The silence between them deepened, not awkward, but full. Then, as the wind sighed outside, he spoke again. "Tell me something true," Josiah said, his voice softer now, touched by something raw. "What was it like before all this?" Mercy looked down, hesitating. Then she reached for his hand and guided it to her chest, just over her heart. "We had a bell," she said, "in our meeting house steeple. My father rang it every Sunday morning and every evening when someone in the parish died. It had the most beautiful voice, clear and deep, like it was calling all the angels home. Josiah closed his eyes for a beat, as if letting the sound settle into him like a prayer. When he opened them again, there was warmth behind the weariness. "I'd like to hear that bell someday," he said quietly. She didn't cry this time. She only held his hand tighter. "Maybe we'll cast a new one." Months passed. In the hidden valley where the Cherokee had once made their winter camps, a small cabin stood near the stream's bend. Made of mountain pine and field stone, strong but humble, it sat surrounded by wild laurel and morning glories. In the shade of its porch, Mercy Blackwood sat cross-legged, stitching a tiny linen gown. Her belly had rounded gently, visible now beneath her woven apron. Humming quietly, she worked the needle through soft cloth, her fingers sure and calm. Beyond the garden, Josiah trained a young colt, murmuring low commands, patient and firm. Every so often he glanced back toward the cabin, catching sight of her silhouette through the doorway, and every time he smiled. Inside, the walls bore no trophies, no proclamations, just bundles of herbs, 2 books, and a child's cradle waiting to be filled. Mercy moved through it like the breath of the place itself, present, grounding, full of quiet life. One evening, she walked down to the stream, the same path she'd taken for months now. The current moved slow and certain. She stepped barefoot into the shallows, let the cool water kiss her skin, and laid both hands over her belly. "Little one," she whispered, "your father, he didn't just forgive. He chose love over loyalty, and he kept his promise to us both." Behind her, footsteps padded across the grass. Josiah came to stand beside her, their fingers entwining without a word. Together they watched the stream drift under the dusk, where stars began to blink into view. No one had expected 2 hunted souls to find something like this. But somehow, in a world of muskets and manifestos, they had created a quiet patch of earth where love had taken root. Not the kind written in history books, but the kind that endured. And the stream kept flowing peaceful, like her name, like their life, like something finally truly home. If this story stirred your soul, if it reminded you that even in the birth pangs of our nation, love could bloom like mountain laurel in spring, then you found your home. Subscribe to Colonial Hearts for more tales of forbidden romance, quiet courage, and love that defies crown and committee alike. From musket smoke to whispered promises, every story is crafted to linger in your heart long after the final word. Where revolution rages but hearts find peace. Subscribe now and never miss a heartbeat from America's founding fires.